All right, folks. I decided to do sort of an impromptu type of a live cast, mostly to answer a question that I've had a number of people ask me, and that I keep on trying to get to. Right, and it's become one of those things. I'll get to it. Well, I need to get to it, and I didn't have time to prepare a detailed video. And for this kind of thing, this may be better done in this format. I do apologize for no advance warning. I was supposed to be in the meeting, and then my meeting got canceled, so I figured I have an hour, and I can go online. And on an off chance that anyone is actually online right now, I can answer some questions, and if not, I'll just talk a little bit about March scopes, specifically March low power variables. They have several of them, and the configurations are fairly similar. The scopes are not that similar. So there has been a good amount of confusion. It so happens that I have some amount of experience with basically all of them. And I'll quickly basically bring up a March website and talk through the core differences and similarities. And we'll go from there, and then I'll stick around for a few more minutes. If there are questions about March scopes or about yesterday's the Guns of the Dark Lord video that I released, anything like that, I'll be happy to take those. And then we'll need to wrap up, and I will go back to work. Okay. All right, I apologize. I'm staring at my phone. It's kind of the middle of the day for me. All right. So naturally, let's hope that my microphone actually works, because if it doesn't, that'll be very embarrassing. I am going to bring up a March website and kind of tell you a little bit about their different low power variables. So first of all, when you go onto a March website, it says March is a Japanese company. They do all sorts of fun stuff. You go into products and scopes, right? And there are different types, and the low power variables are not all in one place, partly because they're quite different. And they will be either under March Compact or under March F. I get most questions about the March F scopes, I think. So we'll start with March Compact, and I'll go through it fairly quickly, and we will go from there. Okay. So if you click on March Compact, you will notice on the left several different scopes, not all of them low power variables. 3 are, and the 3 that you see here are all second focal plane designs. So this one, first one I clicked, is a seemingly conventional 1 to 4 by 24 second focal plane design, illuminated reticle. The big thing about this guy is that it has a huge exit pupil on 1 power. They had a number here. Oh, there you go. 17.8 millimeters, almost 18 millimeters. So it's very fast to get behind. And the reticle is basically a simple number 4 design with a fiber illuminated dot. So it's a pretty bright dot. And because of that, it's basically their version of a dangerous game rifle scope. The big thing about this is that it's really, really fast to get behind. Okay. For the record, so this is the same basic reticle as they also use in a dual focal plane design that I will talk about in a moment. All right. The other similar looking but optically a little bit different scope is their service rifle competition scope, which is a 1 to 4.5 power with MOA turrets, exposed turrets, and a reticle really designed for various competitions using ARs where you can only have magnification up to 4.5. And if you look at it, their regional reticle they did for this is something called MTR D3, right? Which is designed for the types of targets that are used there. This one is not illuminated. Optically, it's an excellent. It's a very nice scope. Exit pupil on 1 power is also very large, 16 millimeters, a little bit smaller than on the 1-4, but still very large. So it's a fast scope to get behind, but this is not an illuminated design. They probably can make it illuminated. I didn't really ask why this one is not illuminated, probably because the competition customers were not asking for it. Okay. And lastly, and this is really the scope that originally got me interested in March many years ago, is their second focal plane 1-10 by 24. They have different versions with different turrets and MIL and MOA, illuminated and not illuminated. So I clicked on the one with illumination and MIL radiant turrets, exposed turrets. This is sort of an interesting design. There are a few different reticles available. This is in fiber and non-fiber illuminated. The design, where is it? I'm trying to find you a good picture. What it looks like. Let's stay on this. The design is interesting in that I think this was the first commercially available scope with a 10 power erector. The reticle is in the second focal plane. And to get all of that working, it has side focus adjustment. So in many ways, the way this scope was originally conceived was not so much as an AR-15 scope like most modern LPVOs have been conceived. Okay. All right. So I've got a question from Mr. Rejective Bunny. Dude, I love the name. This is really good. Let me finish my March spiel, and I'll talk through this question. Okay. And then we'll see where this takes us. Right. So anyhow, so the original March 1-10, this scope has been out for quite a while. It was not conceived as an AR-15 scope, but more as of a compact general purpose scope. Because of the side focus, you can use it on anything from air guns to big guns. It's quite fast on 1 power. You have a reasonable reticle illumination. You can do precision with it. It's optically excellent. There's just a lot of good things about this scope. But until recent, illumination was not really day bright. I think now they do have a fiber illuminated reticle option in it. And I'm looking for a reticle picture. Oh, there we go. So this FD1 reticle. So now they've got potentially have a fiber in it. If you have a fiber illuminated reticle, the reticle design is going to be a little simpler. This is just a number 4. But if you just need a general purpose 1-10, that's also really fast on 1 power. This is not a bad option at all. After they came up with this 1-10, they got a ton of questions. Can you make this with a front focal plane reticle? So they went to work, and they came up with a similar looking design, but it was a little bit different internally. And that's part of the March F lineup. So you have to click on March F on March's website. That was back. There you go. And you notice on the top left here, there are 2 designs, 1-8 Shorty and 1-8. So the Shorty is a new one. I'll get to it in a moment. Before that, there was this original 1-8. Okay. And it looks kind of like a 1-10 we just looked at. At the time, they could not really pull off a 1-10 with a front focal plane reticle. It introduces a bunch of complications. They have done it since with a different model, but at the time they couldn't. And I looked at it, and it's basically, if you like that 1-10 but just wanted a front focal plane reticle, this was for you. The downside, with many conventional reticle systems, is that the illumination on it is not super bright, so it's not really day bright illumination. But once again, the purpose of this was not so much as a run, blast, ultra fast, etc., but more of a general purpose design. So it also has side focus, so you can close up close. It's great for practicing. You can close that thing down to 10 meters. You can practice with this thing indoors. It's still quite fast on 1 power with the right reticle option. And for longer distance, it's very good. Turrets track. It's just a nice general purpose small objective rifle scope design. Different concept originally than modern LPVOs, but it works really, really well. I've spent a lot of time with these. And like that scope quite a lot, and like it still. The the basic reticles, if you want to go a little bit faster with this scope, the reticle you want is the FMC2, where they basically have these concentric circles to compensate for the reticle illumination not being super bright. While if you're looking at it as a more of a general purpose design, FMC1 is actually quite nice, and I like this one quite a lot. I've tried all three reticles. It works nicely, and it works well. More recently, they decided they want to go short. So they made two Shorty scopes. The first one they made was a 1 to 8 by 24 Shorty. It's also a 1 to 8 by 24, also front focal plane. But beyond that, it really doesn't have much in common with the original front focal plane March. And once you see the picture, you'll see why. Notice how short the objective lens system is. So I actually own this scope. I liked it enough to own it. It's, once again, the big thing is if you're going to put anything in front of it, it's awesome. The illumination on this guy is not super bright either, just like in the original 1 to 8. So if you want to go fast on 1 power, you need this reticle with concentric circles. It's still not as fast as the newer designs with very bright dots, but it is very respectable. Because the scope is quite short, there are some limitations in terms of depth of field. So what I found with this optical, it's absolutely superb. But I found that once I get past 600-700 yards, these targets start getting less sharp, simply because just there's not enough depth of field. If you dial back to 6 or 5, then it's easier to shoot further. So where do I use the scope? I actually use it on my subsonic blackout that I like to shoot very far away, because shooting 600-700 yards with a blackout is not so simple, and it's optically superb, has huge amount of adjustment, tracks correctly, and if I need to go on 1 power and go fast, I still can. But because I'm shooting it, using it more as a compact precision scope, the reticle I ended up using is this guy, FMC3, because it gives me a finer aiming point for the longer range things that I want to do. Because these scopes are so nice optically, they do surprisingly well at longer distances, better than I originally anticipated. It's, there's something ultimately enjoyable for me in being able to take a very compact, comparatively low magnification scope and stretch it to a longer distance. It's just something that I happen to enjoy doing. Okay. Now, because it does have a shallow depth of field, and because the market changes and moves, March went and made a Shorty 1 to 10 scope, which is about the same length approximately. This is the newest low power variable, which is the same length approximately. So I do a little bit of consulting for March, and so I had some input on how this scope was done. And basically what the extent of my input was to convince them to go that they need to make a bright reticle in 1 power. And what they did with this scope, they made the dual focal plane version. And what it does, it has the sort of a FD1 reticle that has a fiber illuminated dot in the second focal plane that just always stays there. And I have some ranging marks and stuff in the front focal plane, and the two reticles need to be lined up to each other. It's not such a simple thing to do in production, but March, has very high quality of assembly, and they can actually pull this kind of stuff off, which is a nice thing. There will be other reticles in this. They're exploring other options. And the only reticle available now is the reticle they call DR1, okay, which basically looks like this. The thick bars you see are the second focal plane reticle, so they're always visible. And the thin horizontal hashes and all that come from the front focal plane reticle. And when you go on 1 power, they basically kind of slink away, and they are not really very visible, and you just have nice, bold reticle. The advantage of this approach is that the second focal plane reticle, A, it has a bright dot, B, even without a bright dot, it's just like a German number 4 that is really usable even if your battery is dead across any lighting conditions you might want. So it's a very, very nice general purpose design. Another change, other than the higher erector ratio, is that they added side focus to the scope. And for general purpose use, that makes all the difference in the world. Now, my primary low power variable is a Vortex Razor Gen 3, but when I used it side by side with the March, once we got past 800, 850 yards, or we're shooting really close, if I wanted to, let's say, do dry fire practice indoors, whatever else, the March really had an edge, and the side focus is what enables that. If you don't need to go to extended ranges, you don't need to mess with the side focus. Set it to, I don't know, 100 yards, 150 yards, whatever rocks your boat, and just use it like any other low power variable. It's really fast on 1 power because of the second focal plane reticle. It's quite accurate at longer distances because of the front focal plane hashes, stuff like that. You don't need to mess with the side focus unless you want precision. So if you want to take a low power variable scope and stretch it out toward more precision type applications, March 1 to 10 Shorty offers a really, really compelling option. Okay, all right. I hope this all made sense for you guys. Please, okay, so I've got a few people watching. Please tell me if you want me to extrapolate on anything. Yeah, there you go. So side focus goes from 10 yards to infinity, and I will be happy to go into more detail. I spent a lot of time with this scope. Just sent it off. I liked it quite a bit. I'm probably gonna buy one, but for now, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It is a very, very compelling design, and it is still less than 9 inches long, and it weighs, I think, 18 ounces, which is really good for a front focal plane 1 to 10 with side focus. Okay. All right. All right. I blew through that in less than 20 minutes. That's about as brief as I get, I think. Let's see. I've got a couple of questions. Mr. Rejective Bunny, if you still are here, sir. Hey, brother, love the work you do. I'm in the market for a good LPVO for a SCAR and thought I liked the Vortex the best. Though I like the Vortex the best, I have durability concerns. Was thinking that or the Nightforce DMX or reticle, the new reticle. So for those who don't know, let me pull up a Nightforce website and show the DMX reticle. And so that you understand what Mr. Rejective Bunny means. There we go. I know I had it somewhere. Let me pull up the reticle and I'll get the website on there. Attacker 128 24 reticles. There we go. Okay. And there's a PDF. Okay, found it. So DMX reticle is actually quite nice. I think it's a mini. I like the original reticle that Attacker had, and I like this one. I think they did a good job. And I will put this up. There we go. Bingo. So this is the new Nightforce's FCDMX reticle. It is very similar to the one they had before, except this broken horseshoe type thing has been made a little bit thinner because people who want to use these for precision have asked Nightforce to go a little bit thinner. Honestly, I like the original version and I like this one. I think Nightforce did a very good job with this one, and it's a really, really nice scope. There is really nothing per se that that I can say bad about it, other than I don't like the fact that on 1 power the field of view is a little bit narrow, given how expensive this scope is. In terms of actual use, the Nightforce Attacker and Razor Gen 3 are very comparable, in my opinion. Okay, and so let me, now I'm going to share what the Vortex reticle looks like, because for this kind of stuff, reticle makes a big difference. There we go. Bingo. Okay. So it's a little bit more zoomed in, but that's a very similar basic idea, except Vortex decided to make a smaller donut, if you wish, than Nightforce did. Choose one. I think they will both work very well. For my personal use, so I use the Vortex Razor Gen 3 for 2 reasons. It's cheaper than the Attacker, and it has wider field of view on 1 power. They're both about equally easy to get behind. I don't really have any concerns about the durability of the Razor. Vortex gets a lot of flack for durability because they ship so many scopes. There's going to be bound to be more of the ones that need service. And unlike Nightforce does not have any low-end scope lines. They have mid-range things, SHV, and up from there. Vortex has Crossfire and a bunch of other inexpensive scopes. And because they're cheaper, they will fail more and they will get a bad rep. The return rates on the Razors are very low. So personally, I don't really have any durability concerns with either scope, and also both companies stand behind them. Shit can break, and I don't doubt that both Vortex and Nightforce would fix it if it came to that. I think not long ago, somebody had to take Nightforce to court to get some fix, but that was an NX8. Honestly, I have not seen a whole lot of Razor Gen 3s break or the Nightforce Attackers break. So I really I would not be concerned. Honestly, pick the reticle you prefer and go with it. I'm comfortable with both reticles, so for me, the Razor has a slight edge because of price and field of view. But if you happen to prefer the reticle and the Nightforce, go with that. You're not going to go wrong. They're both really nice scopes. The only real strong competition to these two is the March 1-10 Shorty that I just talked about. But once again, it's smaller and lighter, and it has side focus. But if you are not stretching the range, meaning going very close or very far, side focus doesn't make that much difference for you. In terms of the reticles, I like sort of compact tree reticles and scopes like this. So I actually like the reticles in the Nightforce and in the Razor a little bit better. I'm sure March will come up with a tree reticle soon enough. I mean, that's usually how this works. I mean, they see what the competition is doing, and everybody is trying to make sure they address all possible customers. But for now, the way March works for longer distances, you dial elevation, hold for wind, while Nightforce and Vortex are intended to be used with reticle holding for both wind and elevation. So kind of figure out what kind of shooting you prefer, and figure out which reticle works best for you. And any one of these 3 will work great. If you want to spend some money, Schmidt DLCC is amazing, but it's $4,500. I don't know. Like I said, I've looked at them all, and for my personal use, I use the Vortex Razor Gen 3. And the only real different thing about it, I had Vortex set parallax to 300 yards for me, because I don't need, for this scope, I don't need 10 power at close ranges. But I do shoot fairly far away. So I wanted to be able to stretch the scope further without having to adjust parallax. So I was visiting Vortex, for other reasons anyway. And I had them reset the parallax setting on mine. Okay. But it's hard to make a wrong choice here, basically, between Schmidt, March, Nightforce, and Razor. You have really good options here. Yeah. Okay, so a couple more. For reference, by the way, you can recommend anything, but I'm kind of torn between these 2 for now. Yeah, I see why you're torn, because they're really nice scopes. The field of view of the Nightforce kills me for that kind of money. So Nightforce, people are not stupid, and they make compromises based on their particular set of preferences, right? They wanted a very flat field of view, and it's easier to do when the field of view is a little bit narrower. They also needed to get iBox, basically eye relief flexibility, to be very good, and constricting field of view helps with that a little bit. There's more to the design than that, but I assure you didn't do it lightly. So they got something out of it. But having used them side by side, for me, field of view matters, and I thought that the Razor was really easy to get behind. Okay. Vortex it is then. Screw it. Well, like I said, it's so just to be clear, I'm going to try to tell you how I think about these things, and then you have to use your brain and make your own conclusions. I'm not going to try to tell you which one to buy. I can tell you which one I would buy and why, right? And then you can pretty much take it from there. How does it perform on 1x close range with 300-meter parallax? So it's 300 yards, not 300 meters. It's about 270 meters. Pretty well, actually, because remember, the way I use this scope, I'm not trying to shoot off a mosquito's testicle at 8 yards. Right, up close and personal, I just need to go fast. On 1 power, there's so much depth of field, I'm fine. Right, and keep in mind that your eye will also accommodate a little bit. There's all sorts of stuff happening. I have not seen any real issues on 1 power for the type of shooting I do at close range. So for me, that'll work well. But the Vortex cannot do it on production scopes because everybody's who's trying to zero the scope at 100 yards will put it on 10 power, and it's not going to be perfectly sharp, and everybody's going to be returning them to Vortex. Right. So I was even thinking about setting up a website and have Vortex make a batch of these the way I like them, with miliradian reticle, a long parallax, and sell them as Dark Lord special something, because we'll see. Maybe I'll do that. For me, it works really well. But once again, it kind of depends. If you don't go beyond 800 yards or so, you don't need to do this extended parallax setting thing. I like to shoot it far away just because I'm weird. So for me, it makes a difference. Okay. All right, Grant, you had an earlier question. FMC2 looks like a nice reticle. Taper looks thicker, closer to the center of the scope, bringing attention there quickly. Yes, it does work really well. I liked it. I've spent a lot of time with it. For my use with the 1-to-8 Shorty, I actually tested it with the FMC2 reticle, and then I got one with FMC3. Let me pull this thing up again. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, so this is FMC2. And this gives you the idea of the dimensions of this thing, right? So there are 2 circles, right? There's a large 25 milliradian circle, and there is a smaller circle in the middle that's 6 milliradian. For anybody who has spent some time with things like target type sights where there are front or rear apertures and stuff like that, this kind of a concentric circle stuff is really intuitive, and I really liked it. My only the reason I didn't get one eventually with this reticle is that if you look at it, they have inside of this inner circle, they have comparatively thick lines, and I needed to shoot at some fairly small things for the longer distance stuff that I do. So for me, this was a little bit thicker, but they needed the thick lines here so that they could illuminate them, right? The thinner the line, the harder it is to get illumination going. Okay. And they needed that. So for my purposes, because I do not need that much speed, 1 power, I went with FMC3. Okay. which gives me a very thin center, but I lose speed on 1 power. For my use, it works well, but for a general purpose use, I would go with FMC2. I think it is a better general purpose reticle. Okay. All right. Yeah, I like how it is simple. So many scopes get cluttered. Simple, quick, and fast reticle with the ability to build in dope with a set 1 to 3 milo MOA system. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a very nice reticle, and it's pretty flexible. That having been said, so I like small tree reticles and then front focal plane designs. That is sort of my preference for AR-15 type use, where I don't want to mess with the turrets, right? If you dial for elevation, these traditional FMC type March reticles do a really, really good job. And they never really get confused. One of the things that sort of gets lost in this equation a little bit is that if you use a rifle scope for some sort of a, let's say, reasonable prolonged time period, one of the things that happens is that you start getting fatigue. And the more fatigued you are, the harder it is to use complicated reticles. Complicated reticles obviously have their place, but you still can design them so that you have everything you need and you don't have anything that you don't. Or the stuff that you don't need all the time is a little bit thinner, a little bit out of the way, so it doesn't draw attention to itself that much. A well-designed reticle has to have this prominent primary aiming point that naturally draws your eye. And March's FMC2 does it really, really well. Okay. All right. Yeah, so correct. Every person will use a scope differently and have different expectations. So you kind of have to think about how you want to use the reticle and go from there. All right, so Joe has a question. Recommendations for a first focal plane 1 to 10 around $500. Preferably with BDC reticle, using it for a 20-inch 6.5 grid mode. So there isn't currently a front focal plane 1 to 10 scope on the market that is, in my opinion, worth buying. It basically doesn't exist. There are a few variants out there that I've seen. I don't think they're worth it. I don't think they're well designed. I don't think they're well made. That's basically it. There are some designs coming up in the $1,000 price range, like the new Athlon 1 to 10. That looks promising, but I haven't tested it yet. You know, it's been a little bit delayed. All the supply chain are changing. For $500, I can't think of any front focal plane low power variables that I would be spending my money on right now, honestly. Now, it's my money. How you deal with your money is entirely your business. But I probably just wouldn't. In the $500 range, I'd be looking at second focal plane designs, 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 10. With second focal plane, Swamp Fox Arrowhead is quite good. If you bump up the money a little bit for an 800-ish range, I think you can still buy Delta Striker 1 to 6, which I think is excellent. It has a simple milli-radian reticle. You don't get trees and stuff. I'd be looking at those. Under 500, Delta Hornet 1 to 6 by 24 is actually a pretty nice scope, and it's in a $400 range, I think, and it has a BDC reticle. It's designed for 56, but you can adapt it to 6.5 with use of any basic ballistic calculator. In this price range, I would really not be going into the front focal plane low power variable world. I don't think it's quite there yet. I mean, honestly, even at $1,000, there isn't really anything available that you should be buying, I don't think. 2,000, yeah. At 1,000, let's see how Athlon looks when it comes out, and there are a couple other designs on the way. But from what's available now, I wouldn't. Really wouldn't. Well, Lucas Allen, what kind of mount would you get for the Shorty March? So I still use that one wide ring, but it's not, that's behind the turrets, but it's not optimal. And I'll show you what it looks like. I have some not very well processed pictures, I think. Let me open my photo editing software. I should have one in there. And while it opens, I'll keep talking. Let's see. So March is bringing out a single piece mount. It's basically a 33 millimeter ring up front and 30 millimeter in the back. That's the mount I used with my 1:10 scope, and I have actually a picture of that on Instagram, now to think about it. So let me pull that up so that you can see. That's probably your best bet. No, I haven't. Here we go. Okay. So that is probably the best one, but they're not so easy to come by. So there is an option. There we go. There we go. So on my Instagram and Dark Lord of Optics, this is a single piece mount. It's just like a conventional single piece AR mount with a larger ring up front, and they do have accessory rails for it and all sort of stuff. It worked very well. It was super stiff, didn't budge on me. Really like that mount. It worked very, very nicely. Another option, if you want front and ring mount for March, is using two Burris XTR signature rings. So the way Burris makes these rings, you need one 34 millimeter ring and one 30 for behind the turrets. And the XTR signature rings have these plastic inserts. So if you use plus 20 MOA insert on the top and bottom of the front ring, it becomes 33 millimeters. So you can use that, and you can dial in some slope using the rear ring. It works surprisingly well. I have a few Burris rings here that I've been messing with, and I think it works quite nicely. And it's cheaper, and it's more available, right? If you can get your hands on one, they should be coming in more. March's, single piece mount is very good, but the Burris, using two Burris XTR signature rings will be cheaper. All right, second thing, yeah, Swamp Fox Arrowhead and the 500-ish range is quite good. I like the 1:10. I think they did a very good job with it. Bill, nice to see you, sir. Well, sort of, you see me, I don't see you. Okay, Grant, thank you for stopping by. This was kind of an impromptu thing, and I'm glad to see that a few people were able to join in. I need to get back to work in 15-20 minutes as well, but I'll stick around for a few more minutes, see if there is anything else. Okay. All right, guys, if there are any other questions, we'll have a few more minutes, and I am going to try to see if I have the right picture for you for the original mount that March used on the Shorty scopes. And let's see. Is this it? No, that's not it. No, that's not it. Huh. Somehow I don't see it. Let's see, we've got this one. Nope. Last option. If not, I'll stop looking for it. And we will see. No, I don't see it here right now. It must be somewhere else. I'm not the most organized person in the world, and with all this gun stuff, there is so much photography happening that I am having a hard time managing all the images and videos in a way that they really should be managed. There's one other option, and I'll see if that works. And if it does, then we are in good shape. One of the basic problems is that there are some scopes here you guys should not see. So I need to be very, very careful. Is this one of them? I have a better picture. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna share my screen again. And this is the original March single ring mount. There we go. It's sitting in the bag. I have it on a short bolt action blackout pistol. This is the Q minifix. And if you look here, so this is the scope is basically held by one 4-screw, well, 8-screw wide ring in the back. This is not ideal because if you put pressure on the front, you can shift your point of aim. It generally springs back, and I'm careful with it, but I do check zero with the scope every time. I have them, the company that makes these new single piece dual ring mounts for March. I'm having them make me one with like a 30 milliradian slope because I use this to shoot far away. You know, I do weird things, and that's what I'm going to switch to. Okay. But for now, this works. I just have to be a little bit more careful with it. Okay. All right, guys. We have a few more minutes. If you have questions, and now is the time. While I'm waiting for something to come in, there is something else that I can show you. So I started doing some tests with a couple of different scopes that have been here for a while, and I've been using them. So I'm gonna take some pictures and go a little bit more formal with my evaluation. One of them is a scope from Hilux Optics. So Hilux is this company that I generally like. They are kind of an interesting company. It's a Chinese company that have their own factory. They have a nice facility. I've been there in the US. They where is it? Yeah. Okay. They have sort of a nice facility in the US. They're good people. They don't always make the best scope, but every time they make a new scope, it's better than the one before. Quality is good. Customer support is good. Kind of interesting. So the scope from them that I've been looking at, and I know it's not the latest design. I actually like this one. It's kind of an unpretentious, but the tracks, the reticle is good. The glass is pretty decent. It's a scope called Pentolux. It's a 4-20 by 50 front focal plane design. The turrets are better than on their previous generation stuff. Phenom, etc. Optics are very respectable. I kind of like the way this guy turned out in terms of there you go. Okay, it's it's under $600, which is pretty good for a front focal plane scope. I don't know if it's a class leading, but it is respectable. It's under 30 ounces. It's not huge. It's a really competent design. So I did something. I wanted to play with it, and I really wanted to twist the turrets a lot. There we go. That's a reticle. So there's a simple milliradian reticle. It gives you 9 nice milliradian hashes. Nothing super complicated. It's thin and it works well. So what I did is I put it on my air gun, which is, I believe, this guy. Yeah. I put it on my FX air gun and did a ridiculous amount of shooting with it. Okay. All right. So that's the Hilux on my FX Dreamline in a 25 caliber that I shoot with quite a lot, and it's been damn near flawless. I really can't complain. So I'm gonna put it in the center fire, take a few more pictures, and sort of wrap up my review. But it's an unpretentious scope. I know they have new stuff coming out. It's gonna be better. But I can't, for the money, I can find very little wrong with this guy. So it was sort of surprising for me. All right, Nick McBride. Are you still enjoying the Delta Striker 1-6? Yes, I'm still enjoying it, and no, you can't have it. I actually really like that scope. It's sitting on my KS47 right now. It's a Palmetto AR-15 modified to take AK 7.62x39 magazines. So it's a reliable AR-15 that shoots 7.62x39 and takes AK max, which really this design surprised the hell out of me. So that's what I've got the Striker on right now. Since it has a milliradian reticle, it's easy for me to adapt it to different types of ballistics, and it works great for me on the 7.62x39. The rifle is surprisingly accurate with good ammo, so it works very nicely for me. Okay. What if I ask nicely? If you ask nicely, it's still a nice scope and you still can't have it. Is 1-6 magnification overkill with a maximum range of 300 meters? Currently have a 1-4 and thinking the extra magnification would be nice for plinking and boar hunting things. Look, the question of magnification versus distance is not it's not phrased very correctly. It is it comes down to what kind of targets you're looking at, really, right? It's if your targets are fairly small, a little bit more magnification helps. A bigger question to ask yourself is that what are you giving up if you give up your 1-4 and go to a 1-6? So you have to look carefully at what you're doing there, what kind of scope you're leaving, what kind of scope you're going to. Quite a few 1-6 designs, especially earlier ones, were actually a little bit harder to get behind on 1 power than the 1-4s. So Striker is pretty easy to use and easy to get behind, but there have been other designs that have been less so. So the question is, if you're going to 1-6, are you giving up anything that your 1-4 gives you? If the question is no, then there is really no downside, right? If it's not any slower on 1 power, and if it's not significantly heavier, go to get 1-6. I mean, what are you losing, right? Then you still have all the capability of your 1-4 and a little bit more for plinking precision and stuff like that, right? For me, with the 1-4, I mean, I only consider 1-4 for really applications that I want the lightest weight, because the Trijikan Acupoint and the Steiner P4XI are lighter than any even lightweight 1-6s, right? But if I'm okay with extra 3-4 ounces for something like the Delta Striker, I just go with the 1-6. Okay. Okay. All right, that's that. And I started looking at one of the scopes I have here is that's not it. Why do I not see it? Is the Crimson Trace, is a Crimson Trace hunting scope that is a 3-9x50 design that is also proving out to be surprisingly respectable. So I started messing with it. I did something that Crimson Trace did not really expect. And I put it on a rather unusual type of gun. So who can tell me what gun this Crimson Trace scope is on? Anyone? Anyone at all? No? Okay. It's a Air Force. It's an Air Force Texan air gun that's 50 cal. It's a nice hunting scope. So this is sort of a hunting type air gun. So I put it on and it's working quite nicely. It's an inexpensive 329x50 with the second focal plane holdover BDC reticle, and I'm kind of enjoying it actually. It's working pretty nicely for me. The turrets surprisingly track, although I don't really expect them to. This is not the type of scope where I want that I care about tracking. It's kind of a set and forget, but just a picture. So this is the 50 cal slug that this airgun shoots next to a 223 round. I find something immensely enjoyable about an airgun that's shooting something that big. Just having a blast. All right, got a couple more questions. How bright is the 1 to 10 on 1x? So Sean, you have to be specific. Which 1 to 10 you're talking about? I assume you're talking about March, I guess. When you're saying how bright, I assume you're talking about the reticle brightness, right? So if it's a dual focal plane 1 to 10 March, the illuminated dot is easily day bright. It's not the brightest reticle I've seen. I've seen more nuclear bright reticle, but it really stood out to me on 1 power. It's not just day visible to me, it actually is day bright. Okay. Oh, there we go. There's a clarification. So March 1 to 10 Shorty versus Attacker versus Gen 3 Vortex. So I didn't have the Attacker here, but I used it side by side with the Gen 3 Vortex, since I do have that one. The Vortex does have a brighter reticle on 1 power, but March is bright enough. For my use on 1 power, I basically pulled out my shot timer and did a bunch of shooting with it. They had similar speed, maybe a slight edge to the Vortex, but it was very, very close. So it's pretty bright. Okay. Let's see. Any thoughts on the Amrat 2 reticle for the Meopta Optica 6 1 to 6? Yeah, so I did actually sketched up that reticle for Meopta, but when I sketched it up, I thought that I'm gonna have that the scope will have brighter illumination than it is. As is, it's a little bit too thin and small for a front focal plane low power variable, so I don't think that reticle did well, or should do well, unless they're able to produce a version of that scope that with brighter illumination, then it should work fine. How accurate is the Texan? I haven't done too much accuracy testing with it yet. So far, with that slug that I was just showing you, it seems to be. So I need to tune a little bit of the power. I'm not at the maximum power, and it needs to be refilled fairly accurately. So I tuned the power so I can get 5 shots without having to refuel. So they're going a little bit slow, and there's a little bit of vertical stringing. And it got me to about 2.5-inch 5-shot group at 100 yards with vertical stringing. So somewhere in there, I'm pretty sure I was running out of power. So I need to mess with it a little bit more. And also, I don't have a body bottle, so I need to get a small tank I can take with me to the range. I have a small portable compressor, and going to recharge this thing after every 4 or 5 shots getting a little bit old. So I need a better setup to get consistent pressure, so I can really measure how accurate it is. It's definitely more than accurate enough for any hunting I might want to do with it, and I might want to do some. So probably go shoot a pig with it, something. It's going to be fun. How far do you think these LPVOs can go? 15 power in the future. I really see something like that as a horrible scope. It's possible to make a 1 to 15. It introduces a bunch of complications that I'm not sure are worth it. And because it's hard to make a larger objective with a low power variable and still maintain good 1 power performance. I'm not so convinced, a 1 to 15 by 24, something that is something that would attract me. It'll probably go a little bit higher. I mean, I've seen some 1 to 12, 1 to 11 prototypes and stuff like that, but there's work to do there. Eventually, we'll do a little bit more. I like the 1 to 10 by 24 configuration. Yeah, it's a little bit tighter to get behind on 10 power. Exit pupil is small, but you don't have to be on 10 power all the time. When the conditions are right, it gives you a meaningful improvement over, let's say, 1 to 6. Would I be interested in 1 to 12 by 24? I don't know. That gets, it's a tougher call. But let's say 1 to 12 by 13. So it's the same kind of, 12 power with a 30 millimeter is about a 2.5 millimeter exit pupil, and 10 power with a 24 millimeter objective is 2.4. Almost the same thing. Yeah, I'd be interested in 1 to 12 by 30 if they do everything else correctly. 1 to 15 by 30, I don't know. I think that's pushing it. Now, if somebody can really pull it off without compromising everything else, yeah, sure. If it's still compact and lightweight and good on 1 power, yeah. But it gets really tricky. So I wouldn't expect to see that anytime soon. I think we can solve that problem differently and in a smarter way. I would think a 2.3 to 15 would be much better. Yeah, I agree. For a long time, I've been petitioning, trying to get somebody to make me a scope that's like 3 to 15 by 36, for example, something like that. Where the assumption is that, 15 power with a 36 millimeter objective is going to be a little bit tight, but it's only for when the conditions are good. I really would like to see a 3 to 15. Pardon me, I need to blow my nose. I apologize. I would really like to see something like a 3 to 15 with a smallish objective, 35, 36 millimeter range. Because with a smaller objective, you can make this design compact, short, lightweight, etc. Right? And the idea is to use it as a 3 to 10 most of the time and take it up to 15 when the conditions allow for it. Right? As a DMR scope, I think that would do really well. But I've pitched the idea to a bunch of companies. No one has done it yet, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, 2.5. Yeah, 2.5 to 15, 3 to 15, 2.3 to 15. There's a million options. But I'm not really seeing anyone looking for it. And honestly, I don't think there'd be a huge market because so many people are just so convinced that bigger is just better. Maybe. Not necessarily. I'm not at all convinced that bigger is always better. For some applications it is, but for some applications, compact and lightweight make a difference, right? I'd like to think there should be space in the market for all of that, but I'm not really 100% sure that the powers that be at various rifle scope companies agree with me in any way, shape, or form. Time will tell. We'll see. All right, guys, we are getting close to an hour. If you have any other questions, I have a few more minutes, and then I will probably need to bail out. My phone is kind of blowing up on me. And let me see if there's something. All right, a buddy of mine told me he tried another new RAM, and I have tried that one, so it's going to be a nice discussion. I came in late, but did you discuss general impression on 1 to 10 dual focal plane Shorty March? Yes. So the first 20 minutes or so of the livecast, I kind of did an overview of all of the low power variables that March makes, because like the way it's structured in the website and the way they names are, I had several people being not clear on what is what. So this will become a normal video on YouTube, and if you go and rewatch the first 20 minutes, hope it will clear things up. And if not, please ask a question in the comments or go to my website, darklordofoptics.com, and I will try to address it there. When will your review of the March 1.5 to 15 be coming? I need to get my hands on a production version and look at it. I looked at the pre-production version. I liked it a lot. I think it's an awesome little scope. And as far as a general purpose hunting scope with the most flexibility, that may be the one to beat. But I don't want to do a full review until I see a full production scope. And my schedule is kind of tight right now. So it's coming, but I need to get my hands on one. The prototype I saw was really good. The production one is supposed to be better. They made a couple of changes to the objective lens design. I expect it to be really excellent. But I sort of have a policy. I don't do full reviews on prototypes. My pleasure, Nick. Thank you for chiming in. Really appreciate it. Curious about that one too. I assume you mean the March 1 to 10. It's very, very nice. Like I said, rewatch. I think you joined in a little bit late. I rewatched the first 20 minutes of this, and I give you an overview of March low power variables. Okay. All right, guys. Unless you've got something else, I'm going to bow out for today. Thank you all who chimed in, and I appreciate that you guys were able to. I started doing these occasional midday shorter live casts to basically catch people who either work a third shift or people in Europe for whom it's evening now. It may be more convenient. Okay, there's one more. I would like to hear the benefits and drawbacks of 1.5. So it's pretty simple, really. If you're talking about, let's say, scopes with 1x low end versus 1.5, you're faster on 1x. You just are. If you need to go fast, you need 1 power. It's a big deal. However, with the 1.5 power, it's much easier to make a scope with the largest objectives. Getting a scope with 1 power on a low end that's well corrected and everything with a large objective is really, really hard, and there isn't anything that exists that does it well with an objective more than 30 millimeters. The 1.5 to 15 March has a 42 millimeter objective. So when you go to high magnification, that's a huge advantage. And so this is kind of where you have to make a decision. If you need to go fast and you don't want to have an auxiliary red dot sight, you need a true low power variable, something that starts on 1. If your emphasis is a little bit more on mid-high magnification and you need the low end on that occasionally, then the 1.5 to something is really a good compromise for you. It really comes down to your application and your usage. All right, and with that, I gotta go. So guys, once again, thank you. Thank you for chiming in. Leave more questions in the comments, or my website is darklordofoptics.locals.com, or just darklordofoptics.com. And if you go, it forwards you there. That's sort of my home on the internet, and I do more things there as I go along. And when I'm answering questions, that's the first place I look. So if you're trying to get a hold of me, that's not a bad place to go. Thank you.